Good evening to those of us that has joined us here live at 7 p.m. for Tattva's third video cast. As some of you may recall, a couple of weeks ago, Neeti led a conversation with 4 women on how they were harnessing isolation in the current climate that we're in. Our latest podcast was with Rajiv, who's a GP, and with 3 colleagues in the NHS. They were discussing how their roles and how their jobs are being affected being on the front line. This week, you've got myself, Bhavin, leading the discussion with 5 colleagues in the education field. Now, viewers, I appreciate you've probably seen quite a lot in the media in recent days, in the last 7-10 days in particular, about schools and the potential reopening. So this conversation is with colleagues in different key stages, in different parts of the country, and how are we managing not only the present climate, but also what do we look forward to thereafter. So as a means of introduction, first and foremost, I've got Rupesh. Rupesh gives a wave. Thank you, Rupesh. Rupesh is a primary school teacher based in northwest London, and he's also the father of twins. Thanks for being here, Rupesh. I've got Vikesh. Gives a wave, Vikesh. Vikesh is a secondary science teacher, and he's based in the Midlands. I've got Neeti. Gives a wave, Neeti. Neeti is an English teacher based in South London. And she's also a newly qualified teacher, what we call an NQT in the education world. We've got Arti. There's a wave, Arti. Arti is a primary school teacher in West London. Interestingly, Arti's on maternity leave at the moment. So although she's fully aware of what's happening, she's not in the mix. And last but by no means least, we've got Nevita. Give us a wave.
Hi, everyone.
Hi, Nevita. Nevita is the head of a large grammar school in the southeast of the country. And then you've got myself, Bhavin, who's a secondary deputy head in West London and previously a deputy head in the Midlands. So we've got colleagues from all different key stages. Now, based upon what we do, can I just ask us, because all teachers do this all the time, all we do all day is drink tea and drink coffee. So in the spirit of where we are, let's continue. We don't do that. I don't drink tea or coffee during the day. I actually don't. But anyway, that's the misconception. As I said, COVID, coronavirus, has turned society upside down, and the manner in which we are dealing with all areas of life, not just education, have transformed our thinking. But just from our areas of expertise as teachers, as leaders, I just want to unpick what has that looks like for us in our different contexts, but also there's a great amount of similarities based upon where we are. I am actually going to start with Arti. Actually, Arti, the 5 of us, have been in the thick of the closure and what that's looked like. What have you missed out on whilst you've been on maternity leave?
I think, as a teacher, it's not just about, the education side. For me, it's very much having that relationship with my children and, ending my academic year last year before I went off on maternity. I had a year 5 class who are now in year 6. So, you do build that bond with them. And I previously taught them when they were in year 2 as well. So they've come back round. So, you form a bond with them and, they were so sad that I wasn't being there to witness their final year in primary school. And you could say, I was looking forward to kind of seeing their production, to bring my little one along, so they could meet him. So for me, that's been, quite a big hit, I suppose, because that, emotionally for me, I feel like I've missed out on them and missed out on their final year. Again, being on maternity leave, there's a fine line between, just checking your emails all the time, your out of office is on, but that doesn't mean that you don't want to keep in the loop, because I'm still, a member of staff at the end of the day. Especially with the climate at the moment, I feel like I have been trying to tap in a little bit more with the emails, just check what's going on, speak to colleagues a little bit more. But you feel like you miss out on things like the training side, and just kind of keeping up with the staff and the kids, and especially with, like I said, what's going on at the moment, it's been quite difficult.
Yeah, I think it's interesting actually, because the first thing you actually said wasn't about knowledge or curriculum. You talked about that human element to missing out on, for example, the end of year graduation or the assembly.
Yeah. because that's, you know, that's something they look forward to, and that's something they love to showcase at the end of the production, you know, and that's something they build up to. And even, you know, from watching them the year sixes when they're in year one, in year reception, they're still kind of so excited to get to that place. So for them to kind of be missing out on that potentially, it, you know, it is really sad. It saddens me, and I know it saddens them. So I feel, you know, that I've not been able to be there to kind of support their emotional journey, I suppose, you know, through all of that.
Brilliant. And I'm sure this might come out with our other colleagues about what are we missing out on and what elements of learning we're missing out on. I'm going to go to Nevita, if you don't mind, actually, because someone who leads a school, or a large school, as a head of school, I appreciate the priorities and the demands in terms of the priorities will at the moment be vastly different to what it would have been if you would have been in school. So what have been your expectations, not only of your staff, but of your community, of your families, given that we're in lockdown?
I think first and foremost, I think going back to what Arti's already mentioned, it's about really trying to maintain the complexity of those relationships, albeit from a distance, because I think we undervalue how important relationships between colleagues, between line managers, with our parents, with our stakeholders, and of course, most of all, with our students. Those relationships are sometimes taken for granted, but actually no learning happens of any real value if those relationships are not valued and are not taken to be seriously as they are. And I think maintaining those relationships from a distance has been the greatest challenge, and it continues to be the greatest challenge. And actually it's going to be the biggest challenge for us to manage all of that when we do go back, is actually academia is going to happen, there's no doubt about that, but actually restoring the mental wealth of our students and of our communities is going to be really difficult. So I think what surprised me is how everyone has just come together to be that big community and team that we always are, and that I'm sure all schools are. But I think when there's adversity, I think everyone steps up that much more, and you come to rely on people that much more. And I think the students have also stepped up in that way, but obviously in their own context and in their own environments where we might not all be completely familiar or know about the difficulties and the challenges that they've all had at home, and not undermining also what staff might have had at home, because again, we're all going through this. It's not just the children, we all have our own families as well. And I think the health and safety of each other is going to be the most important. It is now, and it will be when we come back, whether that's before the summer or after.
Yeah, it's a brilliant point. Tattva's first video cast a couple of weeks ago was exploring this notion of mental health to a certain degree and people are managing. And it's interesting that both of you have touched on that almost immediately, that this managing of ourselves emotionally is as crucial as getting through the curriculum.
I'm sorry, I would interrupt and say actually it's more crucial, because if we ensure that we manage that and we nurture that, then everything else we know will follow. And yet if we don't nurture that and manage that and try and maybe meet some parents' expectations who are worried about their daughter or son not getting that grade 9 or grade 8 or whatever it may be. And of course, you know, parental concerns and anxieties are completely real and we completely understand those. However, I would argue that mental wealth, more than health, is actually so important for everybody, for all of us as adults and children alike, that's in the long term, that's going to be much more important than any grade, because if we manage that, then everything else will follow.
And I also think, just touching on that, you know, it's important for the children to be aware that we are, you know, with them in this, regardless of not being able to see them all the time. And just, you know, I think there's so many schools and teachers that are, you know, doing little video clips, like we've done that ourselves. So, you know, all the staff chipped in and, you know, you made little posters and we've kind of put a little collage together, which was lovely, and put that on the school website. So, I mean, I was really blessed to still be part of that, although I'm on maternity leave. But I think I know already that the children and the parents seeing those, it would just put, you know, a smile on their face, because it is a bit of doom and gloom at the moment. And so for children to still know that we are thinking of them, I think again that will add to their positive mental health. Yeah, for real.
Yeah. We've got to accept that teachers are humans.
Yeah.
They're humans before the teachers. and actually they are also, as Nevita you've mentioned, is they may have a backstory. So yeah, that takes me nicely to Rupesh. Actually, Rupesh, you teach at primary school. It's a faith-based primary school in northwest London. How have you, in particular, and your school in general, managed this closure?
Yeah, I think exactly what the ladies have said. You know, the academia is always a worry for her parents. I'm a parent myself, and the twin girls were 6 years old. You know, initially everyone was obviously trying to do what they could, but then we do Zoom lessons once a week. The first couple of weeks, you know, I think we're in week 7 of lockdown now. First couple of weeks, it was trying to teach them, you know, but then, like the ladies have said, it's all about mental well-being. Emotional well-being. So I've got a year 2 class, you know, it's a 2 form entry, small, but we decided actually just the children interacting, saying something for 20 seconds to their whole class, seeing their classmates, seeing the teacher's not teaching something, but they're just saying, we'll call it PSHE, you know, emotional development and personal development, but that, the lady said, that has given more than sort of anything else that we've been able to do, and that, like you said, it's the most important thing in our minds when we do that. We're still setting them work in Google Classroom and things like that, you know, but we're saying do what you can, because even as a parent as well, I know how difficult it is. The first few weeks weren't so bad, you know, sun was out, so it made a big difference. But then, you know, it got harder. It's just getting harder for everybody. Like, you know, everyone's finding out this is a bit more long term. We're not going back to school. We're not seeing our friend. Can't even see our family. Own children can't even see their grandkids, grandparents rather. Sorry, you know, apart from a distance over the phone. So it was a big change for everyone. So obviously, like all the schools, you know, we're going in the rota as well, and that's nice, because I think a teacher always wants to teach. Even if it's 10 children in their own class, they can do something. That teaching habit doesn't go away. That's why the Zoom lessons, you know, pros and cons to everything, but we enjoy it because we can see our class, like the ladies were saying, especially if it's primary school, you've got those children for 6, 7 hours a day, you know, and they've got you as well. I mean, they're 6, 7 years old. When we left on that last day, some of them cried, you know. So like you were talking about, when you were talking about the emotion, it's like, I don't think I've cried for ages. I think the last time I cried is when I found out I was going to have twins. But, you know, and I nearly kind of shed a tear as well, because it is that you don't realize, you know, it's that personal thing more than anything else. You're absolutely right. You know, education will come, the academia will come, but this emotional well-being, unfortunately, mental illness we see is the biggest.
Yes.
Disease, the killer in the world. Cancer is always also out there, but this, you know, whatever age you are, us as adults, the staff, colleagues, the young children, there's a lot of pressure on them for lots of different things. So now we're really focusing on that, but providing with whatever we can as well.
Sorry, can I just chip in there to say that it's actually, I mean, you know, we talk about the doom and gloom, and obviously there is a lot of doom and gloom. And then some people will talk about the silver lining and looking for opportunities, as we always should, and we should be optimistic and we should look for those opportunities. And this situation does present itself with a number of different opportunities, but one of those opportunities is about taking that sort of mental health and mental wealth aspect that much further, and considering our you know, character education of our children, and how this is an opportunity to develop that. They will have been witness to a number of adversities. They will have seen adults around them being anxious and being concerned and worried. They may have lost people in their family or seen people in their family very ill. There may be a large variety of different things that they will have been exposed to that perhaps they were or were not ready for, and we should use this as an opportunity to develop their characters even further than what we already do in school. And that's one of the other reasons I feel that academia should take a backstage and allow for this relationships curriculum, this mental wealth, this character education to be the most important thing that we focus on, and that should be our priority, whether that's at primary or secondary, because actually harnessing the experiences of both our students and our staff and our school communities will allow us to do that much better.
Really, yeah, absolutely. Sorry, Rupesh, go ahead.
No. That's right.
Yeah.
No, you're absolutely right. Completely agree. And this is something else I wanted to mention as well. You're absolutely right with everything you say. And we've got a bit more time, it seems, with the family and at home. So we can give those values. You know, we can spend time discussing our values, because what is generally the biggest issue is time. You know, time for discussion but not just as a parent, as you know, with your loved one, with your partner, family. Talk about that. Like we say, be honest. You know, especially talking about children. You know, at home, be honest. You shouldn't do this. You should do this. But why? But what does that mean? You can say be honest to a child. You can say that. But what does it mean? Now you have the time to talk about the values of gratitude. You know, we're lucky. Okay, it's a difficult situation that we're in, but are we lucky? Have we got enough food? We've got shelter. You might say the bare minimum, but other people don't have that. So is there charity? What can we do? This is also linking into some of our dharmic values that we also have as well, you know. So these things are also important. So, you know, something that I'm emphasizing with my children in school and my own children as well, that we've got that time to discuss and spend a bit more time going deeper into everything, linking everything, like you
just
said.
say is, sorry to interrupt, my background is in philosophy and religion, and when you look at, you've mentioned Dharma there, if you look at some of the philosophies within the Gita itself, there's a real obvious, let's call it a distinction between that righteous knowledge is important, but also that spiritual knowledge. And actually all three of you have touched upon it. So strangely or not, that's very dharmic. That's in terms of our very own philosophy, right from centuries ago, you know. So really valid point. We'll come to this in a minute. So I want to touch upon all three of you are parents. I appreciate Arti's young boy is 8 months, is he?
Today, yeah, 8 months today.
8 months today, yeah.
Yeah.
So I want to touch on the thing about parents, because I think some people forget that teachers are also parents, and you've got to juggle that. We'll come to that shortly. Because can I just go over to you? You're a secondary teacher in the Midlands, and science in particular. How have you and your school in particular dealt with the closure, and in particular the science learning? I know we've had a conversation about this because it's quite specific, isn't it? Going over to you.
Yeah, so I think initially when everything kicked off, everyone was on battle stations. You didn't know what to expect, where we're going to come out of it. It's like meetings here and meetings there, and discussions on how we're going to, what are the strategies that we can put into place. But I think, especially my department and the school that I'm at, they're very, very organized, and we were really quite high-tech savvy school in that sense. And it was quite an easy transition to go through. It was just a few, bit of training, really skills, how to log in, and how to get the kids in, a bit of how to even plan and mark your lesson online. These are things that we've not actually done, but we discovered that there's so much software out there that we can use. It's made our life so much more easier. And I think from a teacher, I know you just mentioned parents, but for teachers who are parents as well, to set and plan and mark and look after their kids at the same time, I can imagine it's extremely stressful. Personally, I think for myself, planning routines into my day, I think the first 2 weeks were a complete write-off. I didn't know where I was going to be working. 5 minutes I was on the sofa, then I was on my bed with my laptop, and then I realized halfway through that this is not going to work. So I needed one fixed space, certain times for conference calls. I'm ringing kids throughout the day, answering their emails, and trying to juggle all that. And in between meal times, which are really important to me, and my beverages. So I think one of the things there, I think routines, and speaking to the kids and the parents, and it's been good to see that they themselves have planned in routines into their daily lives. My initial thought would have been with the students that they'll just be wake up late, stay awake till late, do homework last minute, set the task because we put deadlines and everything. But they've been brilliant, and the parents have been just nothing but grateful to the support that we've provided. And it shows that that you have to work as a team being at school, and it's just phenomenal time to be in. Every day is different.
It's interesting, isn't it? I've said this to a friend only recently. It's the only profession in the world where we are governed by a bell or a buzzer. isn't it? That structure, that routine, I think we're conditioned as teachers to work within it, and actually our children naturally do it. I mean, I'm a deputy head, and just as Nevita was saying, is we're managing things remotely, so having meetings through a laptop, as opposed to face-to-face. And things do take longer because you can't deal with things as you would in school. But the power of a structure, you know, getting children up, and this morning as I was teaching, my children were there the vast majority on time. And actually, some people may well have thought they might have been in bed. But
I think they do. I think they appreciate it though, honestly. Like, you know, speaking with, you know, my 1 to 2 littles, obviously, you know, but he still has a structure in his own kind of way, his own routine. But, you know, speaking with my nieces and my nephews who are primary aged, they really do value having that, you know, that routine of waking up at a certain time, you know, wanting their lunchtime. And, you know, one of my brother-in-laws has actually set up a timetable for his children just as they would at school, and they were part of kind of putting that together, you know, to say what time they wanted their literacy and their numeracy. So I think they do value having that kind of routine because it helps them. Yeah,
and like I said, we're conditioned as teachers because we work in an occupation where a bell governs our movement. So yeah, Neeti, last but by no means least, it's an interesting one. You're an NQT, so a newly qualified teacher. So when you started in September, having done your training year, what did you expect the year to look like, and actually what has it become since lockdown?
Well, when I first started, I expected myself to be a sponge, just to, you know, sponge everything that I see, all the experienced teachers in the school, observing them and just taking it all in, taking their skills and adapting them to mine. But it seems like all has not gone to plan. And it sucks, to be quite frank, because your NQT year is so special. You have all this time for your planning and your preparation and assessment. And I think what ladies have also mentioned is that the interaction is key. As a new teacher, you really depend on the interaction and the relationships you build with the students in order to, you know, formulate the classroom, in order to engage them with your teaching and learning. And having that completely stopped, it's become quite different to maintain those relationships online because the kids aren't there. They don't have that timetable to come to your class to interact with you. They're at home, so there's no obligation to really connect with you. And when the lockdown was announced, I mean, it hit everyone's morale quite low. Everyone, including the students, they were really scared about, you know, what's going to happen, and it also affects the mental well-being. It affected mine. I was really scared about going back to school, having lost those connections with the students that I had put so much effort in and formed. So that hurts as an NQT because I think everything's too serious for me right now. I want to do everything. I'm too motivated. I think as years go by, I'll probably chill out a bit, really take things as they come. But right now I'm like, I want to do this and I want to do that, and I want to show that I'm worth it. I want to do everything. But so it does take a toll on your mental health. It did take a toll on mine. In the initial weeks, but then you start to get into your routine. You start to interact with students via Google Classroom and Zoom and Google Hangouts, and you start to realize that, I mean, it's not going to end anytime soon, so you just have to make peace with it, and that's kind of the motivation you give to students. But having said that, education does not stop because life is still going on. They still need their education in this time zone that we're in. And education doesn't just come in the form of academia, it can come in any shape or size. I mean, education can be learning with your mum in the kitchen about cooking. That could be food tech. You could be speaking or reading with your little sibling. That could be English. You're learning new vocabulary. But unfortunately, not all students would have that sort of access in their homes. I mean, a lot of students would be surrounded with a lot of equipment and resources in their classrooms. And with this lockdown, many students, I mean, from the area that I'm from, South London, the socioeconomic background of a lot of students isn't quite to be apt. So when they are home, they do really struggle with completing all the work that is now set online. Many of them might not even have their own computer. And they have to share one computer in the household with 3 other siblings, and their siblings, if they're in the above years, it's priority based. So it gets to a point where they haven't completed the work that you've set, and it's not their fault. It really is not their fault. So having to juggle all of that as an NQT has been really tough. I realized, I mean, the reason why I got into teaching was, you know, I wanted to bring that innovation into my practice, into my classroom. And I've now realized that I'm doing a lot of admin work, emailing everyone, chasing up with emails, chasing parents up with phone calls if their children haven't done enough work. So all of that, I mean, I did, when I got into teaching in my first year, I thought, you know what, I was a little apprehensive about the workload, and I started to manage that really well. And that's all thanks to the department that I'm in. I feel like I've been really lucky with my school and my department. They've really supported me and the other NQTs that are there. But now having to do all of this online and grasping the technological side of teaching, it can get a little tough.
I mean, if there's a silver lining here, to use a phrase that Nevita did at the beginning, is you're going to become a whiz at technology, where some of us took a number of years before we had to embrace some of the intricacies. So you've touched on something that I wanted to explore, especially with the nature of the children that we teach in our different settings, and their backgrounds and their, as you mentioned, the socio-economic backgrounds in terms of the access to learning online. I know in a school like ours, almost a third of our children are entitled to free school meals. So it's a government initiative now that'll be paid. So I've worked for weeks now with this national scheme to make sure that all the families get their vouchers. It's not been easy, and it's given me sleepless nights, because I want to make sure my families get given those vouchers because they're entitled to them. So I appreciate the work that the government have put in to enable that to happen. Nevita, can I just go to you? In terms of the expectations of your community, what has been one of the biggest challenges for you, thinking about your families in your community?
I think being a selective grammar school, the expectations from our parents for that continued learning and that continued challenge, I think has been there from the outset. I think we've sought out feedback from our parent body twice now, once very recently, just earlier this week, and once right at the outset, sort of 2 weeks into lockdown. And although the overall feedback has been really positive, they just want more, you know, more online lessons, more live teaching, more feedback, more phone calls from teachers. And sometimes those expectations can be quite impractical and unrealistic, because they're not taking into account that we may be working on less of a workforce than we would normally have, because there are teachers who may be unwell, teachers' families who may be unwell, that they may not have access. Actually, we talked briefly about access to technology for students, but actually that's not that different for staff. Everyone's working from home, and we can't just take it for granted that every single teacher has their own laptop, and their partners will be working from home. They'll be sharing those devices, and we can't be expecting that they've got access to those devices all the time to be able to be online for their students all the time. So, you know, there's a number of challenges, and I think managing those expectations and making sure that we are trying to communicate as effectively as possible and be as transparent as possible about what is actually realistic and manageable during this time has been most probably the greatest challenge. And we have tried very hard to do that. So we're our school is part of a small trust. So wherever possible, we've kind of had trust bulletins going out at the beginning every single day, like the government briefing, and now it's been sort of every week, so that parents are kept up to date and involved. We've set up year group hubs on Google Classroom. So as well as all the subjects and all the lessons that the students are partaking, they all also have a community feel. So they have their form group on Google Classroom, but more importantly, they have their year group, which is managed by their head of year. And, you know, there's messages and things that are going on there on a regular basis. We also have like a virtual register, which means that students can register. They don't have to, but if they would like to, and put a comment on there for their learning manager and tutors to read. And I think, again, coming back to those relationships and just making sure that people are actually okay and everyone is happy and safe has been our #1 priority. But I think managing those expectations from parents is always a challenge.
Can I just ask them, that based upon what you've just said, have you been explicit with your families and your parents about this balance between hounding, if that's the right word, your staff and staff being parents, carers?
Yeah, we have. We've absolutely been clear about that. And inevitably what it means is that there is some inconsistency, and it's not necessarily because a child is in year 7 that they're not having any live lessons, and because they're in year 10 they're having all live lessons. We're not prioritizing in that way to say that year 10 and year 12 are more important and therefore year 7 don't need to have live lessons. It just really depends on who their teachers are and whether those teachers are able to deliver those lessons in that way or not. And we haven't compelled any of our staff to do that if they don't feel comfortable doing it. You know, we were given 2 days notice by the government that we were closing down. We were anticipating the closure and we had Google Classroom ready to go, but it wasn't something that we had ever used before. To then expect teachers to do live lessons at the drop of a hat with all the other anxieties that are ongoing, I think that's too much. And I think it should be left down to those individual professionals to make that decision about whether they feel comfortable doing that. And we have not compelled any of we have 200 staff at my school, and not one of them have been compelled to do something that they don't feel comfortable doing. And I think parents have to accept that, just like we wouldn't want to compel the students to participate in something that they feel uncomfortable with. We cannot do the same with our staff. So that I think has been most probably the greatest challenge, if I read between the lines from the feedback that we've had so far, and the minority of parents that have not complained or moaned. I have to be fair. It's just sort of saying, you know, I'm concerned that my daughter hasn't had any live lessons, or hasn't, you know, I'd prefer to have this, I'd prefer to be taught this. Can she come into school and change her library books? No, she can't. If we allow her to do that, then we have to allow others to do that. So it's sort of managing those kind of expectations.
And Nevita, the context of your school, as you said, is almost specific in certain respects to certain demands. You know, you were selective, like you said, a girls' grammar. So an expectation of some of the families may be slightly different to other schools. Let's be frank. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I mean, one of the key problems that we had at the beginning was that I think our teachers were most probably setting too much work, and some of our children were actually working non-stop from sort of 8:30 in the morning to 6, 7 o'clock in the evening. And we had parents feeding back to us to say, you know, I don't see her, she's just working and she's having too much screen time. And obviously we've managed that and balanced it out, because again, teachers aren't used to the fact that setting some work like they would for a cover lesson, but if you've got six lots of that in a day, it takes students that much more longer to comprehend what is being said, to understand, because there's no live teaching. And I think that also makes a difference, because they don't have each other to you know, they don't have their peer support either. So I think they're working in a very different dynamic to what they may have been doing obviously in the past. And a classroom environment and learning in the classroom is very different to learning from a distance, obviously, and that obviously takes that much more time. So I think it's been balancing on both ends.
Yeah, I mean, just to give an example,
sorry, I was just going to add something to what Nevita was saying. Having also, I'm also working in a boys selective grammar. I found that, I mean, I feel that in comparison to what Nevita said, parents at my school, they've actually been very understanding, and we've not had any complaints. In fact, we've had tons of emails in support of and thanking us for everything that the teachers are doing. So I think that's something different that I've noticed, which going into a grammar school, I always thought, you know, parents would always be very academic heavy. They'd always want results for their children whatsoever. But having said that, I do think that the students in a grammar school face a lot of pressure from home, regardless of what we see as teachers. So during this time, not having that teacher influencing the teacher influencing the learning and the lesson physically, and not having that peer connection and the peer discussions that kids mostly learn from, kids are really doubting themselves in their home learning, even doing the tasks. I get about 10 messages on Google Classroom just wanting that validation, whether they're doing the task right or wrong, because they're facing that pressure from home that regardless of what's happening right now with the situation, they need to stay on top of things.
Yeah, and then focus.
Having said that, it affects their mental well-being immensely. We've had, being a year 7 form tutor, I've had a lot of year 7 sending, emails, just, heartfelt letters saying how much they actually miss school, which we never thought that would happen, but just saying how much they miss the interaction that they're having in school, having that validation from teachers, even just to say, coming back to that routine.
But Nevita, what we said at the beginning, all of us have said it, is our roles rest on great relationships. And without those relationships, teaching becomes even more difficult. And we've now got to be forming those relationships in a different way, or in a way that we would never have thought we would have ever done.
No, and I think that's new for all of us. And I think, if anything, it reminds us of the value of those relationships. If there was ever any doubt about how valuable those relationships in the classroom are, then I'm sure that every single professional across the country in education has been reminded of that during this time, because actually it's those very relationships that we're depending on right now to ensure that we continue working with our students and our parents, because without those relationships we wouldn't be able to achieve any of the things that we've been able to, and any of the successes that we most probably have had, because there will be many, will not have happened if we didn't have those ongoing relationships with our students and parents.
I think one of the positive things actually on that note that I found is obviously the importance of having that parental communication with your students' progress on a regular basis. Doesn't happen. Now, I've been quite fortunate that with my form class, I'm ringing them every week, and the parents are amazing, and they just appreciate so much more communication. And I think this is definitely something that, as teachers especially, I think we can continue once all this is over, because I think the parents see us as a support structure who are trying to mold and adapt their children for them, because we spend quite a lot more time and around them. So.
Yeah, it's funny.
And I think that's been in the media quite widely, about sort of parents trying to homeschool their children and finding out just how difficult that might be, and sort of valuing teachers so much more than maybe they have done in the past. So yeah, I mean, there's always going to be some positives that are going to hopefully be learned from this, but let's just hope that they last for longer than a couple of weeks after we go back.
Absolutely. And this whole thing about homeschooling is a really interesting one, isn't it? Because what's been in the media in the last few days and in the last week about when we're coming back, and it's probably going to be a phased return. I think we could all guess that's going to be the case. And we've got to unpick as to why is that the case? Is it because we want to get children back in? Are teachers really willing and wanting to go back, or is it the pressure from parents in the economy? But all schools, and I'm sure I know a piece of it I'm doing with my head at the moment, is looking at what a phased return will look like. I'm sure Nevita, you'll be looking at yourself. Can I just go to you, Arti, because it's something that I think we've discussed briefly. You have a middle leader, so you've got a responsibility for a key stage. And what will that look like when you go back in July? Or do you not know? Are you just thinking, oh, I'll work it when I get there?
I mean, that's a conversation we'll definitely have to have as, a whole school and, part of SLT. But I mean, for me as a middle leader, it will definitely we'll have to keep, as it has been, so far, the children at the forefront of our minds, and making sure that, yes, they would have missed out on a lot of content from the previous year. They would have moved up to the next year, come September. So, you know, it's kind of trying to find that balance of, yes, we do need to still cover content, because we can't sit here and be ignorant about it and say, oh, it's fine, you know, it's all going to be rainbows and fairies, because it's not. We've got to, you know, understand that the academic has to come back into play, is going to come back into play. And we need to face that. So it's kind of, you know, I think it will just have to be some kind of a balance in thinking, you know, yes, content will need to be covered. Is it going to have to cover from previous year, along with, you know, the content they need to cover in the year that they're going to be in? But it's not trying to overwork the kids. So I think as teachers, you know, I'm going to try and push for a lot more creativity and kind of cross-curricular. How can we cover things that maybe they haven't covered in more fun and exciting ways, so that it is, because, you know, we can all face it, our timetable is tight. You know, we've talked about that before. So, you know, putting in extra hours is not going to happen. We don't have those hours in the day to cover things. So, you know, I think it's just making sure that children, you know, are on track, you know, with their education. But also, you know, for a lot of children, it's going to be a big deal coming back into school. You know what children are like after having 6 weeks off. You know, it's kind of, it's quite daunting for them to come back in. So I think, you know, having that transition period for the children, also for the staff, I think there's going to be a lot to cover. But like I said, I'm off at the moment. So for me, it's going to be, I think, even more so, because I've been off for the year, so kind of out of the loop. So I think there's going to be an awful lot to consider, both academically, emotionally, as we've talked about, and all round. So yeah, I think there's going to be quite a lot to cover, to be fair.
And Rupesh, thanks, Arti. Rupesh, again with you being a primary teacher and those gaps in knowledge, I appreciate as secondary teachers that it's often at the fore of our minds, because we're in an educational era where knowledge is crucial. The GCSEs, the A-levels have become significantly more demanding in terms of knowledge. What does that look like for you in terms of a primary curriculum? Are you worried?
We've discussed it as SLT, because I am part of SLT as well. But to be honest, you know, we're racking our brains like many people are, sleepless nights over it, in the sense that, 11 o'clock night, and you might think of another question that you have to ask, but we really don't know. I mean, you know, even the ministers are doing the best that they can, but this is a world situation no one's ever been in this lifetime. So we can, you know, one story I heard that year 6s will do their SATs in year 7. There'll be pros and cons to so many things. Before I look at anything, you know, as they were speaking about, all those things were true, is like, how are we going to get reception children to social distance? You know, the first thing they're going to do is they're going to come and hug their teachers, you know, even the year 2s, the year 1s. So how are we going to even do that? How are we going to deal with the lunchroom? How are we going to get we have like 480 kids or 420. You guys have even bigger, I'm sure. How are we going to get, even if it's phased, even for 60 children, is lunchtime going to be staggered over 3 hours? You know, all of those, that's not even education. That's not academia. That's just like practical senses. You know, some schools have like, you know, 1,000 children walk into the gate, and 1,000 children, some have that, you know, they have to come in a car. You know, it's like a drop off and things like that. How are we going to manage that, you know, and different, so that is all the stress there. The academics I thought of, but I've had to put it on the side. And then every SLT meeting, we started a couple of weeks ago, you know, we have it weekly. And I said, okay, we'll think about it more, we'll come back to it. Think about it more, we'll come back to it. And yeah, it's very different. It's just the health and safety. And then, like, you know, we're talking about staff. Some staff are going to come in, are healthy. Those that are not, how's that all going to pan out for, again, health and safety of everybody concerned. Even as a parent, you know, if, let's say, year 3 come in, but year 1 don't, how flexible our work going to be for, you know, my year 3 will come in, but my year won't. My childcare, there's so much to consider. And, you know, one of the takeouts,
I'm glad
so much.
We've not touched upon it, and I wanted to just very briefly, because I'm conscious of time and we will the next shoot. But as a parent, and Nevita, you're a parent of a girl in year 9, is that correct?
That's correct, yeah.
Yeah. So Rupesh, how are you, just briefly, how are you managing homeschooling your twins as well as trying to teach online? I'm sure that's a battlefield, right?
That's a struggle. I mean, the first couple of weeks, it was like Google Classroom. I've got my computer here. I've got my iPad in another room. I've got my phone as well, the app. So I'll try and do what I can, as well as trying to deal with the twins. you know, who are typical 6-year-olds. So we were very lucky with the weather. And I think after time, you know, like you said, nobody has the answers. Speaking to other friends, other colleagues, and just like, let's do some English, writing, maths, you know, a little bit, and then it's just spending some quality time with the creative arts. So we've been very lucky with the weather, you know, so going out for a bike ride or a walk for an hour. That's generally after lunch. That's what we've been doing. Planting, gardening. I think someone said here, you know, education, it comes in so many different forms. Oh yes, you know, as a teacher of 15 years, I'm worried about the academia is there. There's a drop in that, but that's for all the children. But like we've all said, I'm all in agreement, the mental well-being of them, myself, my wife, who's, you know, in the kitchen most of the day now, like cooking all the time, like many people are, you know, is just trying to have some quality time together and find it. And the school understand, and as a teacher, you know, we're lucky. I'm lucky as a parent and as a teacher. I understand as well. To my children, do the best you can. Because frustrations from the parents on Google Classroom is that they can't do this. I can't tell them to. I can't teach them this. It's like,
Yeah.
we completely get that. You know,
You don't
you know, we understand it. Yeah. So we're trying to, you know, we're trying to do the timetable thing, but sometimes we let go. You know, the teacher, you're kind of the worst parent, and sometimes like you have to do it this way. You have to do it the teacher way. But it's not like that with your own children. They don't listen to you as it is as a teacher. But when their teacher calls, they'll listen to them straight away. So that's the thing. So we're just doing little bits and bobs. But again, it's that quality time with each other and just spending time that we can. But it's hard for everyone. I think that's what we've all said. Mental well-being for everyone concerned it is the biggest thing, and it's going to be the biggest thing carrying on for sure.
Nevita, can I just go to you then briefly? Secondary school is where your daughter is. How are you finding that balance between leading a school, but also the parent of a daughter and I? How's that going?
I think it hasn't been that much different to sort of being at work and constantly feeling guilty about not being able to spend enough time with your family. And although the first couple of weeks were a little bit sort of unexpected and no one really quite knew what they were doing, as time has gone on, everything has got busier and busier and busier. You know, one moment we're focusing on trying to get those free school meal vouchers and trying to work out, you know, ensuring that the online learning is all happening in the way that it should be. Then it was very much focused on centre assessed grades, as you know, for GCSE and A-level has been a massive job in itself that is still ongoing. And now obviously our focus has shifted to what will this reopening look like, and what might that phased approach look like, and what will our recovery curriculum look like. And therefore, yes, I've been able to spend some time with her here and there, and it's been a little bit more flexible than it usually has. But otherwise, I have to be fair, she has just got on with it. She doesn't enjoy it. She misses school, which I never thought I would hear her say, but I think that's most probably all of the children around the world, let alone the country, saying for the first time that they miss school. But you know, it's not often that a teenager says that they want to go to school, and she, you know, she misses her friends, and I think they miss those bonds and that sort of whole community feel. And I don't think that's ever going to go away, and it's going to be difficult for her to learn that perhaps it might not be her year group that are going back first. There'll be other year groups that might go before her, and she knows that sort of I'm involved in that decision making, and that's always a bit of a challenge in her understanding that it's not her needs that have to come first, it's the whole school needs holistically. So I think I'm fortunate that she has managed it as well as she can. She sort of sticks to the school timetable and the 6 period day and sits down to work at 8:30 and doesn't usually get up till about 3:30, 4 o'clock, but then doesn't do anything else after that apart from go for a walk and other bits and pieces.
That's absolutely fine.
But that's fine, you know, there's a good balance there. And I think community groups like Yorg have been brilliant in sort of, you know, ensuring that there is a sense of community, even if it is only once a week in a, you know, joint quiz using Zoom or whatever it may be. I think she's really enjoyed and benefited from that. And I think that most probably helps her to sort of remain motivated and keep focused. And I think, again, we shouldn't ever undermine or undervalue the power of those communities that we are fortunate to have, because I think that can be missed. You know, academia is one thing, but those communities and the support that they provide each other is second to none.
Yeah, really.
I'd like to I'd like to be devil's advocate here, because I know I do believe that mental well-being is extremely important with these circumstances at the moment. But I've also noticed that, I mean, I've spoken to some NQTs that I did my training with, and having a 11-year-old brother that I live with who's just started year 7 at a state school, I want to bring up that I don't feel that many schools are doing a lot. I mean, Harsh's school, my little brother's school, that they haven't been posting weekly work, daily work. And that just brings that disparity between the students who go to schools that have been posting daily work and have been checking up on all the workload that the kids have been, you know, going through, or checking the work activities that they're completing. But having said that, we do say that academia isn't a lot, but going forward, what are we going to do about that disparity between those two, between those two types of students? One who, even though they aren't getting the ideal form of learning in this situation, but they're getting something, they're doing something, they're occupying their time with some information that teachers are putting up, in comparison to the students, who, let's say, aren't receiving as much support from their teachers. And unfortunately, if they don't have, if their parents are key workers and are going out for work every day and they're left home alone, they're not getting the same support. And that's obviously going to bring that disparity between those two types going ahead in the future. And that might affect the students later on, and it might affect their well-being later on in time, where they start seeing that they've missed a lot of time in comparison to the other.
And Neeti, I think what you've done is you've unearthed potentially a kind of worms here, isn't it? It's as Arti mentioned about the remodelling of the curriculum, Nevita mentioned the recovery curriculum, and what would that look like? I mean, that in itself is a debate that as educators, teachers, we not only having, but we'll continue to have even this time next year. Because what does that look like? Hey, colleagues, like in the true spirit of teachers, we can potentially talk for the next 3 hours, you know, put a group of teachers in a room together. And I'm conscious of time, and like I said, is the takeaways I've taken from our conversation is really, and it was quite powerful that each and every one of you that spoke at the beginning mentioned this notion of spiritual and emotional well-being, mental well-being as core to what we do as teachers in the present environment. And as I said, the philosophy of the Bhagavad Gita is very similar to that, this notion that righteous knowledge is matter, but also that inner consciousness, that spiritual learning is really important. So just to close where we are for today, I'm just going to go to each of you in a sentence, just in a sentence. What would be your takeaway for any of our viewers? Bear in mind, some of our viewers will be teachers, but some of them may not be teachers. There'll be parents, there may even be some students watching us. So what is your one takeaway? Vikesh.
I think the main takeaway for me is that we're all living in this thing together, and we've all become students. So I'm not a teacher anymore. I am a student as well. We're all learning. I think just having patience and, you know, communicating with each other and being there for each other, I think definitely we can all come out of this in a positive notion.
Yeah, nice. The notion that we've become learners as well. Yeah. Neeti, what's your takeaway?
Mine?
Yes, please.
I was going to close off with a Sanskrit shlok that really motivated me throughout my education and inspired me to become a teacher myself.
Yeah.
But I think giving the Sanskrit shlok would be too long, so I'll just start off with explaining the English translation. The giving of food is a great type of charity, but the giving of knowledge is even greater than that. The satisfaction obtained from food is only momentary, while that gain from knowledge lasts lifelong. And something that I've mentioned before is that knowledge comes in different shapes and forms. So it doesn't have to be academic. You can be learning and gaining knowledge from all different key parts of life. And you know, we're all learning at the same time, and knowledge is the key to the successful development of society. So as long as we're learning something in this time, it's going to stay with us for the lifetime. Yeah,
nice. Thank you. Rupesh.
You know, teaching for 15 years, we know teaching is a service to the community, to the parents, to the children, everyone. And the Bhagavad Gita speaks about service to others. So this is a crucial time where we need to give charity, be grateful and give service to others however you can to whoever it is. Might be the next door neighbor who crosses the road when you're coming for social distancing, just smiling and saying, "Are you okay? Do you need anything?" Something like that. Service to others.
Brilliant. Thank you. Arti, your takeaway for us.
I think, you know, during this period, the word appreciate has come up a lot. You know, every Thursday there's lots of appreciation. I think, you know, appreciation for key word for NHS workers, for us as teachers. And I think, you know, the appreciation is there now, and I don't think teachers have always had that. So I know that I am, you know, my heart has become quite full with the appreciation of teachers. But I just feel like, you know, my takeaway is, you know, appreciate each other, appreciate your children, appreciate your time with them, and just appreciate what you have, because, you know, no one would have expected in this time that you would appreciate being able to go to the shops and buy, you know, a loaf of bread, you know. So just appreciate the small things in life, because I think we've taken things for granted for far too long.
Brilliant. And the next time someone tells us that teachers they have too many holidays, yeah?
Oh, completely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nevita, your takeaway for us, please.
I think we've well established that we're not going to be able to just pick up from where we left off on the 20th of March when all schools were closed. That would be very naive of us and very foolish of anyone to think that that's going to be possible. There's going to be a real period of true social, you know, sort of disorder. And I think never before has it been more important that compassionate leadership is at the forefront of all of this. All of us are leaders in our schools, in our classrooms, and I think that compassion and kindness is going to be so important in ensuring that we're able to restore the mental wealth and health of our communities. So I think the important message for me is that kindness and compassion should never be seen as a weakness, and that now is the one time that we should always try and be kind.
Beautiful. It's a nice way to end. And as I said, the mission of Tattva really is to nurture thought leaders, people like us who have a real interest in a certain field and look at it from an academic perspective. And I think that was a beautiful way to end. So thank you, Nevita. But colleagues, I've taken probably an hour of your time, but thank you so much for participating. And I'm sure all our viewers who are watching have taken lots away from us. Good night. Thank you so much.
Good night. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.